March 1969. Sammy Davis Jr. was sorting through fan mail in his Las Vegas dressing room when he found a letter that didn't look like the others. No fancy stationery, no return address, just a plain envelope with Oklahoma postage and handwriting that looked like it had been written by someone whose hands weren't steady. Inside was a single page that would send Sammy on a mission that would expose one of the military's ugliest secrets and change how America honored its fallen soldiers. The letter was short, direct, devastating. Mr. Davis, my name is Robert Johnson. My son, Private James Johnson, died in Vietnam 11 months ago. The Army said he was a hero. They said he saved 6 men from his platoon before he was killed. They said he earned medals for his bravery. But when I went to collect those medals at the ceremony in Oklahoma City, they told me they couldn't give them to me. They said there had been complications. They said I should understand the situation. Mr. Davis, I think they won't give me my son's medals because I'm black, and my son died saving white soldiers. I'm writing to you because I don't know who else to tell. I don't know who else would believe me. But I thought maybe you'd understand what it feels like when they take something from you just because of the color of your skin. My boy was a hero. He deserves his medals. I deserve to have them. Can you help me? Robert Johnson, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Sammy read the letter 3 times, feeling his hands shake with anger. He'd spent the last decade fighting for civil rights, marching with Martin Luther King Jr., using his fame to shine a light on injustice. But this was beyond anything he'd imagined. The United States military refusing to give a black father his dead son's medals because the son had died saving white men. He picked up the phone and called his manager. I need you to cancel my shows for the next week. I'm going to Oklahoma. Sammy, you can't just cancel a week of Vegas shows. Do you know how much money? I don't care about the money. There's a father in Tulsa who buried his son 11 months ago and still doesn't have his medals. I'm going to get them for him. 3 days later, Sammy pulled up to a small house on the north side of Tulsa, in a rental car, having flown commercial under an assumed name to avoid press attention. He wanted to understand the situation before this became a media circus. Robert Johnson answered the door, a man in his early 60s, wearing work clothes, his face showing the kind of exhaustion that comes from grief mixed with fighting bureaucracy. Mr. Davis, Robert said, disbelief in his voice. You actually came? You asked for help. I'm here to help. Can I come in? Robert's living room was neat but worn, the furniture old but well-maintained. On the mantelpiece was a photograph of a young man in Army uniform, Private James Johnson, smiling with the kind of optimism that young soldiers have before they learn what war really means. Tell me everything, Sammy said, from the beginning. Robert sat down heavily, like the story itself was a weight. James enlisted in 1967, right out of high school, wanted to serve his country, was proud to wear the uniform. He wrote us letters from Vietnam, told us about his platoon, about the men he served with. He never mentioned that he was the only black soldier in his unit, but we figured that was probably the case. When did he die? April 1968. His platoon was ambushed. James was on point when the shooting started. Instead of taking cover, he ran forward, drew the enemy fire, gave his platoon time to get to safety, saved 6 men, got shot 11 times doing it. His commanding officer wrote us a letter, said James was the bravest soldier he'd ever seen, said he was recommending him for medals, said he was a hero. Robert pulled out a folder containing letters, official Army documents, and newspaper clippings. Sammy read through them carefully, his anger growing with each page. The Army sent someone to our house to tell us about the medals ceremony, Robert continued. Said it would be in Oklahoma City at the state capitol, said the governor might be there, said it was a big honor. We drove down, my wife and me and James's 2 younger brothers, dressed in our best clothes. Felt proud, you know. Despite everything, despite losing our boy, we felt proud that he was being recognized. What happened at the ceremony? There were maybe 20 families there, all getting medals for their sons or husbands who died in Vietnam. They called us up alphabetically. When they got to Johnson, this Army captain stood up and said there had been an administrative error, said the medals hadn't arrived yet, said they'd mail them to us, said we should go ahead and leave. Robert's voice cracked. But Mr. Davis, they gave everyone else their medals that day. Every single other family walked out with their boys' medals. Just us, just the Johnson family, we got nothing. And I saw how that captain looked at us. I saw how he talked quieter when he got to our name. I've been black in Oklahoma for 60 years. I know that look. I know what it means when white folks get uncomfortable and start talking about complications. Did you follow up? Ask what happened to the medals? I wrote letters, 10, 15 letters, to the Army, to my congressman, to anyone I could think of. Either they didn't respond or they said the same thing. Administrative delays, complications, under review. It's been 11 months. My wife cries every night, not just because James is gone, but because they won't let us have the medals he earned. It's like they killed him twice, once in Vietnam and again by refusing to honor him. Sammy felt something harden inside him. This wasn't just bureaucracy. This was deliberate. This was racism so casual and so accepted that Army officers felt comfortable doing it in public, in front of other families, without shame. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. If I make this public, if I turn this into a fight, your family is going to be in the spotlight. People are going to say terrible things. The Army is going to defend itself. This is going to get ugly. Are you prepared for that? Robert looked at his son's photograph on the mantel. Mr. Davis, my boy died for this country. Died saving men who probably wouldn't have sat next to him at a lunch counter back home. The least this country can do is give his daddy the medals he earned. So yes, I'm prepared. Make it ugly. Make it public. Make them explain why a black soldier's medals aren't worth delivering. Sammy made calls to journalists, to civil rights lawyers, to his contacts in the entertainment industry who had connections to politicians. Within 48 hours, the story was national news. Sammy Davis Jr. accuses Army of withholding medals from black soldiers' family. The headlines ran in every major newspaper. The Army's initial response was predictable. They denied everything. Issued a statement saying there was no racial motivation, that administrative delays were common, that the medals would be delivered soon. But Sammy and the lawyers he'd hired did something the Army hadn't expected. They found other families. Turned out the Johnson family wasn't alone. Over the next 2 weeks, they identified 11 other black families whose sons or husbands had died in Vietnam, been recommended for medals, and never received them. All of them had gotten the same runaround: administrative delays, complications, under review. All of them had been told to be patient, to understand the situation, to stop making trouble. The pattern was undeniable. White soldiers who died saving other soldiers got their medals within weeks. Black soldiers who died saving white soldiers either got their medals delayed indefinitely or received lower honors than their commanding officers had recommended. It wasn't official policy. It was something worse. Institutional racism so deeply embedded that it functioned without anyone having to write it down or officially approve it. Sammy held a press conference at the Tulsa chapter of the NAACP. Robert Johnson stood beside him, along with 3 other fathers and 2 widows whose loved ones had been denied their medals. The room was packed with journalists, civil rights activists, and veterans who'd heard about the case and wanted to show support. The United States military asks young men to die for their country, Sammy said, his voice steady but filled with controlled rage. It asks them to put on a uniform, pick up a weapon, and face enemy fire. It tells them that if they're brave, if they save their fellow soldiers, if they give their lives protecting others, they'll be honored. They'll be remembered. They'll be heroes. He gestured to the families beside him. These men did everything their country asked. They were brave. They saved lives. They died protecting their fellow soldiers. And their families were told to wait, to be patient, to understand that there were complications. The only complication is that these soldiers were black, and the men they saved were white. The only complication is that America still can't decide if black courage counts the same as white courage. The press conference made national headlines. Veterans groups began calling for investigations. Civil rights organizations filed formal complaints with the Department of Defense. Congressmen who'd been ignoring Robert Johnson's letters suddenly wanted to be seen as champions of military justice. 10 days after Sammy's press conference, the Army announced that all 11 families would receive their medals in a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, presided over by the Secretary of Defense himself. It was framed as correcting administrative errors, but everyone knew what it really was: the Army backing down in the face of public outrage. The ceremony took place on a cold November morning in 1969. The 11 families stood in a line, each one receiving the medals their loved ones had earned more than a year earlier. Robert Johnson accepted the Bronze Star and Purple Heart that had been awarded to Private James Johnson, holding them carefully like they might break. When the official ceremony ended and the press began to disperse, Robert approached Sammy, who'd attended quietly, standing in the back, not wanting to make the day about himself. "Mr. Davis," Robert said, tears streaming down his face, "you gave me back my son's honor. I can't ever repay you for that." "You don't need to repay me," Sammy said. "Your son earned those medals. You earned the right to have them. I just made sure the Army followed through on their promises." "But you didn't have to do this. You didn't know James. You didn't know me." "I knew enough. I knew a black man was being denied something he'd earned. I knew his family was being disrespected. That's all I needed to know." But the story didn't end with the ceremony. The publicity around the case led to a Department of Defense investigation that uncovered systemic problems in how medals were being awarded and delivered. They found that black soldiers were statistically less likely to receive high honors, like the Medal of Honor or Distinguished Service Cross, even when their actions were identical to white soldiers who did receive those medals. The investigation led to reforms: new oversight procedures, required documentation for any delays in medal delivery, mandatory reviews when a commanding officer's recommendation was downgraded or denied. It didn't fix everything, but it made the system more accountable. Over the next few years, Sammy received letters from dozens of other families, thanking him for shining a light on the issue. Some of them had been fighting for years to get their loved ones' medals. Others had given up entirely, accepting that the system was rigged against them. Sammy's intervention had given them hope and, in many cases, results. Robert Johnson became something of an activist himself, speaking at veterans events and civil rights gatherings about his experience. He always credited Sammy with giving him the courage to fight, but he also emphasized that the fight shouldn't have been necessary in the first place. "My son died for America," Robert would say in these speeches. "He didn't die for white America or black America, just America." But America wasn't willing to honor him the same way they honored white soldiers. That's wrong. And if it takes celebrities like Sammy Davis Jr. to shame the military into doing the right thing, then that tells you something about how far we still have to go. In 1975, 6 years after the Arlington ceremony, Robert Johnson received another letter from the Army. They'd done a comprehensive review of Private James Johnson's actions on the day he died, and they were upgrading his Bronze Star to a Silver Star, one of the highest military honors. The Army flew Robert and his family to Washington, D.C. for another ceremony, this one specifically honoring James. Robert called Sammy as soon as he got the news. "They're finally giving James what he deserved from the beginning. I wanted you to know. I wanted you to be there." Sammy was performing in Vegas and couldn't attend the ceremony, but he sent a telegram that was read aloud at the event. Private James Johnson was a hero from the moment he put on that uniform. His bravery in combat was matched only by his father's bravery in fighting for justice. Robert Johnson taught America a lesson. that honor doesn't mean anything if it's only given to some people and denied to others. James, your father never stopped fighting for you. That's heroism too. When Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990, Robert Johnson, now in his 80s, made the trip to Los Angeles for the funeral. He stood in line with thousands of others who'd come to pay respects, clutching a frame containing his son's silver star and a photograph of Sammy standing beside him at Arlington in 1969. When he reached the front of the line and saw Sammy's casket, Robert placed the framed photo and medal beside the flowers and said quietly, "Thank you for giving my boy his honor back. Thank you for showing America that black soldiers' lives matter. Thank you for not turning away when I asked for help." The story of Sammy Davis Jr. and Robert Johnson became part of military history, taught in some military academies as an example of how institutional racism can persist, even in institutions that claim to value merit and sacrifice above all else. It's also taught as an example of how individual courage, both from soldiers like James Johnson and from advocates like Sammy Davis Jr., can force systems to change. Today, the reforms that came from that 1969 case are still in effect. Medals are tracked more carefully. Delays are investigated. Families have more recourse when they feel their loved ones haven't been properly honored. It's not perfect, but it's better. And that improvement exists in part because a famous entertainer read a letter from a grieving father and decided that justice was more important than Vegas shows. If this story of a father's fight for his son's honor, a celebrity who used his platform for justice, and how one letter changed military policy moved you, make sure to like and subscribe. Share this with veterans and military families who understand that honor means nothing if it's not given equally. Have you ever fought for recognition that was rightfully yours? Tell us in the comments about standing up when institutions tried to deny you what you'd earned. Hit that notification bell because these stories about fighting for justice, honoring sacrifice, and refusing to accept discrimination are what we need to remember.